Handoff, Adrian up the middle, room to the 20, cuts to the left to the 25, and Adrian's loose! He splits the defense! 50, 40, 30, goodbye, baby! Touchdown!
We bleed purple, and our bones are gold. Hear the horns coming out of our dome, behold. We are Minnesota Vikings fans. We love when a player scores, we roar, ignite the stands.
Hey everyone, you are listening to the Purple People podcast. My name is Kyle West. I am accompanied by Adam Carlson.
Heyo.
Kyle Smith is out this week, but he'll be back next week. So,
I hope so.
Just me and Adam tonight.
Kicking it old school.
You betcha.
I'd like to welcome everyone to episode number 123 of the Purple People podcast. This one is titled Uncle Bucs. I love Uncle Buck. That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
I was just going to say absolute classic film.
Oh, yeah, John Candy, there's not much better.
And we beat the uncle out of the Bucs this week.
That is true. The uncle took the... Well, I was going to make a beating in the woodshed joke, but I don't think that's a good idea.
Too soon, Adam.
Yeah, I stopped myself on that one. I'm sorry, guys. But let's get into the quick hits. I only have a couple because, to be honest, not that much went on.
We'll take that. Every now and then...
The NFL trade line went and gone today. Vikings made no trades, but that's usually the way it goes. There was a lot of hype that the Vikings might be trading for someone like Doug Martin or...
Vincent Jackson.
Yep. I heard a lot of. Or I even heard Mark Barron, but none of those trades came to fruition for the Vikings, so... Oh, well, what can you do?
Yep, I never buy into really any of that the Vikings are going to trade for big-name players, because that's not really the MO of the team underneath Rick Spielman.
No, I think that if the Vikings were to make a trade, it'd be more of a draft day trade or a postseason trade, like an off-season trade.
Yep.
I don't see them making moves during the middle of the season, especially since the team is moving in a pretty good direction right now, it seems. Aside from that, the Vikings didn't make any transactions. There were no players signed or released, which is good as well. A little bit of continuity on the team. Last year, about this time, we were talking about so many players getting cut and added. But it's nice not to have to talk about all those guys over and over.
Yeah.
There's news that next week the Redskins may have their dynamic passer and runner RG3 back for the game. If he's unable to play, it will be Colt McCoy once again.
Who put on a show on Monday Night Football last night.
That is true. He played a pretty good game against a defense that many analysts say is better than the Vikings defense in Dallas. Although
We'll see.
I'll go on record to say that's debatable.
I think that's debatable. I think we'll save our defensive talk for later on in the show, but we are a young group headed in the right direction.
Speaking of defensive players heading in the right direction, young linebacker Anthony Barr was nominated for Pepsi Rookie of the Week for his efforts in Week 8, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later on.
Oh, of course.
Now let's get into the main topic here. The Minnesota Vikings took on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday, squeaked out an overtime win after Anthony Barr pulled the ball out of Austin Seferian-Jenkins' hand, and a jarring hit from Harrison Smith helped knock the ball loose. And after that, Barr scooped up the ball and rambled into the end zone for the game-winning touchdown.
Absolutely stellar play by the Vikings defense. Great teamwork, like you said. It was a combination of Barr being able to strip it and recover it. At pretty much the same time, Harrison Smith laid on one hell of a hit from behind. I will just segue right into it. My game ball for the week goes to Mr. Anthony Barr. He has been...
Oh, yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, he has been... Yeah, sometimes obvious choice is obvious choice for a reason, and this is definitely one of those. We talked about it before, how we kind of thought that, hey, he's a project guy with a lot of potential that we'll be talking about maybe more so in the future. He's really seeming to pick this up quick for the Vikings, which...
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, I love it. I absolutely love it.
What's scary is he's still developing his technique, and he is this good based on his physical potential and just freakish nature alone.
And
That's what's scary about him.
And I think what's really helping his development is Mike Zimmer. If you listen to Anthony Barr in his post-game presser, he talks about how Mike Zimmer is constantly on him, trying to get him to improve, trying to get him to do better. Even when he's out there making plays that Barr thinks are good plays, he'll come to the sidelines and Zimmer will tell him, "Hey, this is what you got to do better on. You got to do better on that play." So I like it. I like what Mike Zimmer is doing quite a bit.
Absolutely. And who do you have for your donkey this week?
I'm going to go with Marcus Sherrills again, just because I'm still not seeing it from him in the punt return game. We got to see more from that, especially on the offense that was a little... we had to punt a lot, so that puts a lot on Jeff Locke, the punter, and our return guys as well. And I just wasn't quite seeing it enough from Marcus this week.
No, it's not the kind of smart decisions that we're used to seeing from him. Now, I had a couple of really good decisions that I could have gone with for my game ball. Anthony Barr was the obvious choice, but since you already made that, I will go another direction. I could have gone the Vikings offensive line, which allowed only 1 sack in this game. Just unbelievable when you think about it. But instead, my game ball is going to 8-year-old Alex, which if you haven't heard this story, the young boy with muscular dystrophy who sat in on a practice and sent a nice thank you note to Mr. Zimmer. If you haven't had a chance to read it, let me read it for you. It says, "Dear Mr. Zimmer, thank you for letting me watch your practice last Saturday. It was fun. The players were nice to me and signed my Viking helmet. My grandpa said to expect good luck for you because you have used up all your bad luck already." So the Vikings themselves gave the game balls to Alex and his grandfather, so I think it's only fitting that I give my game ball to them as well.
Awesome choice. Like you said, it was, you can go online over on Vikings.com, and in the post-locker room celebration, Mike Zimmer talks to the team about that. Teddy Bridgewater even brings it up in his post-game presser with the media. He brings up that story as well, too, and that's just a great thing, very well-deserving. Glad we got to mention it again here on the show.
Yeah, several people from the team are actually saying that he's their lucky charm, which is kind of adorable in a way.
It is. We've got a lot of...
my donkey for the game is Matt Asiata.
Understandable.
Now, I know that they got Matt Asiata involved in the passing game a bit, but when you have 4 carries for 1 yard and one of those runs was 5 yards, that means that your other 3 carries averaged a negative 1 yard. And let's be honest here, we need more from our power back than that.
We do. That's not the kind of production you want to see from Asiata. The hard part about him, though, is that I do feel like he is a good back in terms of catching the ball on those little short screens and check down passes. Like, he does get yardage after that, so that's why I'm not completely for yanking him from the game plan, but I would rather see Jerome Felton get more of the short yardage carries than Matt Asiata.
Well, he's a solid blocker. He's a good guy to throw a pass out to every once in a while on the flat. But in the run game, he was just non-existent.
I think a good way to put it is that you're going to ride out the rest of the year with him, but if he makes it...
I don't see him in the long-term plan.
I don't. If he makes it next year, I think it's just kind of a training camp preseason nod. I don't see him being on the 53 next season.
He would have to really shine on special teams.
Yeah.
I think. But he's a guy that right now I've appreciated what he's done for the team. He's stepped in when he needed to. He's plowed into the end zone a couple times, not in this game, but in the past. So I appreciate what he's done, but I don't quite see him in the plans. Yeah. So Teddy Bridgewater played a pretty solid game. Passed the ball 42 times in this game. Completed 24 of them for a completion percentage of 57.1. Scored a touchdown and did not turn the ball over. A pretty solid game from the rookie passer. He picked up a couple big plays on 3rd and long, and he had a nice pass to Greg Jennings in the end zone that, to be honest, I haven't seen a lot of established veteran quarterbacks make that pass.
It was an extremely nice pass. by Bridgewater. Those are the kind of strides that, when he has, and it's early in his career, but even when he has kind of an off game, you see him do something like that, and you go, okay, that is where you feel like he is headed. You can see the potential with Teddy.
It's true. On the other side of the ball, Mike Glennon had a better completion percentage at 67.9 after attempting 28 passes. But he did throw an interception. It was Captain Munnerlin's first interception of the season. A lot of folks are pretty hard on him because he has struggled in coverage and hasn't been able to get some turnovers after being essentially one of the Vikings' higher profile signings. But maybe this is just what he needs to get back on track.
It's all part of a process. Like I said, try not to get too worked up over it this season. But, the secondary back there is still kind of patchwork in places, so I don't put it all on Captain. But it is nice to see him finally get that big interception for the team and to start to, give him maybe a head of steam to start to improve on.
Yeah. Well, the secondary is getting a lot of help from that crazy Vikings pass rush.
Yeah, it all starts up front.
Absolutely. But before we talk about the defense, let's talk more about the offense. Okay. Jerick McKinnon had 16 carries for 83 yards, averaged 5.2 yards a carry. This is a guy that I was hesitant on when he was drafted. I didn't know if he would be able to adjust to the NFL level at the running back position, but he has been proving me wrong for several weeks now, and I'm so glad he is.
I'm super impressed with Jerick. Here is a guy who I really feel like the team drafted as a project player who got suddenly thrust into a role, a starting role essentially at this point, and he has really taken the ball and ran with it, pun intended. And I'm liking what we're seeing from him. He's getting explosive plays and yards after contact. Like, you're seeing every week from him, you're seeing him step up his game. And that is a great thing for a Vikings team that is probably post Adrian Peterson at this point.
Yeah, definitely. The only other person to accumulate more than 10 yards on the ground was Cordero Patterson, who had 10 on the nose on one of those jet sweep runs.
Good game from Cordero. We can segue into him. 6 receptions for 86 yards with the longest of a 28-yard reception. He had some pretty stellar catches near the side of the field where he was able to stay in bounds with them.
There was one third down play that was really impressive.
Yeah.
That he reached up and caught. But what scares me about Patterson in this game is that he was targeted 12 times and only caught 6. But I am assuming that as the targets keep coming, the receptions will come a little bit more. Patterson right now is still dealing with a hip issue and an ankle injury. So as he gets healthier, I expect those numbers to get better.
Yeah, I don't think he's super healthy at the moment. We've talked about the lingering maybe hip problem that he has. Reports were after the game that he was limping and was in a walking boot.
He was.
So he is a little banged up right now. But I like seeing those clutch catches from Cordero because I know a lot of people were right away wanted to compare him to Randy Moss just because of the number that he wore. And you got to remember that they are two very different players. And those kinds of catches, I think, are what Cordero can make a name for himself to where you'll say, hey, he's not Randy Moss, he's not Percy Harvin, but he's Cordero Patterson, and this is what he can do. So I like that. I hope he can continue to improve upon himself like that.
There was another guy, too, that I almost gave my game ball to.
Who's that?
And that was Chase Ford. 6 catches on 6 targets for 61 yards. Ford has been awesome in place of Kyle Rudolph. He's just one of those guys that you can plug in when you need him, and he could get the job done. And he was just exemplary in this game against the Bucs. Yeah,
he had one drop that I wasn't too big of a fan, never a big fan of drops, but I thought he had one pretty bad drop. But otherwise, it was a good game from him.
I think you're thinking of Red Elson's drop.
Was that Red?
Because Chase Ford did not drop a pass.
Yeah, you're right. That was Red Ellison. Yeah, anyway, my point for Chase Ford I wanted to make is that I really feel like we have that second tight end that we can finally pair with Kyle Rudolph, that we were talking for so long about Minnesota running a 2 tight end set. Well, there you go. I feel like we have our 2 tight ends on this team.
That's true. They can use him in that manner if they wish to. Charles Johnson continues to see a lot of playing time. He had 5 targets on the day with 2 catches, 18 yards. I really didn't expect him to see as much play time when he got picked up. I figured he'd be one that would be inactive on game day quite often. But he's finding the field and actually contributing, so that's awesome.
North Turner is trying his damnedest to make Charles Johnson be the Vikings' deep threat receiver. Like, they're calling the routes for him. Teddy's tried to get the ball to him a couple times down deep. He hasn't quite connected with him, but I'll be damned if they're not trying with that kid.
Gotta like the effort. Greg Jennings had 3 catches on 6 targets for 38 yards in the game's only passing touchdown for the Vikings. Like we said earlier, it was an awesome pass and an awesome route by Jennings to give himself just that small window there to allow Bridgewater to throw the pass in. Really awesome to see that happen. Blair Walsh missed 1 field goal in this game, which came back to haunt the team a little bit, but it was an extremely long field goal, and, well,
he is human.
Can't make them all.
He is human. He will miss every now and then, but
a lot of folks were on Jeff Locke about his power punting that happened to fall in the end zone a couple times. A lot of folks really upset on Twitter about that. But he ended up with an average of 44.8 yards per punt, 3 touchbacks, 3 inside the 20. Overall, I think he just needs to get his power under control, work a little bit more on the accuracy, maybe start angling punts a little bit out of bounds just to make sure, especially on shorter punts for him, because he does have a booming leg. So that's something that Locke can work on, but he wasn't as bad as folks were saying.
My solution, don't make your punter punt 8 times in one game. Vikings offense. Like, just go down there and score some points and don't put your punter out on the field that many times.
That would be optimal, yeah. Defensively, the Vikings played a really solid game. They held Tampa Bay to only 13 points, which is pretty amazing considering the Vikings defenses of the past.
Yeah.
Now, there was only the 1 interception from Captain Munnerlyn. Aside from that, we had several players that were getting tackles, led by Anthony Barr with 8, Sharif Floyd with 7, and Chad Greenway with 6. But there was a Vikings sack party going on, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The Vikings got to the quarterback 5 times. Brian Robinson, nice to see him getting in there and getting a sack. Hopefully that can get his motor running, because he's gotten close so many times this year, but has struggled to bring him down, and maybe this will be what he needs. Everson Griffin, Tom Johnson, those are guys that you're used to seeing sacks from, along with Anthony Barr. Sharif Floyd actually played an amazing game on Sunday.
I would venture to say that was maybe Sharif's best game as a pro.
Possibly.
I mean, it was up there. He was making some plays for this team.
He was showing speed, technique, everything that you want to see from a defensive tackle. A lot of people were already ready to label him as a bust, and they were looking at, maybe the Vikings should try to clear up some cap space to try to sign Sue this offseason. But honestly, I'm nowhere near ready to throw in a towel of any kind on Sharif Floyd.
No way. I can, if you watched the post-game show last Monday night, Steve Young had a really good comment that I'm going to paraphrase here, where he said that with the way they have training camps structured, teams get so little time with their players anymore that even with preseason, you really don't know what teams are fully capable of until a couple months into the regular season. And I feel like we're finally hitting the point where you're starting to see Zimmer's work up front with these guys finally start to come through. And you're starting to
Yeah.
see guys like Sharif Floyd go out there and start to have really good games for this team. It's because they're getting chemistry, they're getting experience, they're getting it going up front.
Very true. There were only 2 passes defensed in this game. One was the interception by Captain Munnerlin, however you like to pronounce it.
Munnerlin.
And the other was Anthony Barr, of course, who seems to be everywhere on the field. All right, so what was your major impression of this game? What was your takeaway?
Vikings defense coming back up. We last season historically bad defense for Minnesota. This year, our big takeaway, I really feel like, is that we're improving on defense, and we are going to continue to improve upon it the more we get in Mike Zimmer guys on this team. And we're going to have a top, like a couple years from now, opposing offenses are going to be, circling the board. We got to play Minnesota. We don't want to play that Minnesota tough Vikings defense. Just like what we were used to, back in the old day when we had the Williams Wall and Jared Allen out there on defense. We're headed back in that direction, and that is a good thing for the Vikings.
Oh, that is so true. Right now, it seems as though the Minnesota Vikings have the number 8 defense according to yards per game allowed, which is astounding when you think about it that way. The Vikings also, according to NFL.com statistics, have the number 4 pass defense in the NFL.
And that's amazing. Look at who we played. I mean, the quarterbacks we played, you guys know.
Drew Brees,
Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. I mean, the scheduling gods, for us being a bad team last year, we got friggin' hosed at the beginning of our schedule. It was
a rough
not
start.
An easy patch for the Vikings. So
we forgot Matt Ryan too, who had the number 1 offense going into that game.
Yeah, no slouch. So yeah, I understand that. It was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've been pretty awful this season. Perspective,
right?
Perspective. But this team is making strides in a really good direction defensively.
Very true. Next week, the Washington Redskins travel to town to take on the Vikings. Both these teams came off just astounding overtime wins last week. The only 2 games to go to overtime, as a matter of fact. The Redskins won with a field goal and then a defensive stop against Tony Romo. And the Vikings won with that Anthony Barr fumble recovery and touchdown. So, as far as which team has the most momentum, I don't know. But I think that the home field advantage might be enough. And to be honest, I think I'm more afraid of a Washington Redskins team led by Colt McCoy than RG3.
Thank you, Adam. That was exactly the next point that I was going to make if you weren't going to do it. RG3 hasn't played. I don't know when he got hurt, but he's been out for a while now. And I really feel like he's going to come in and he's going to be cold. And it's probably going to work in the Vikings' favor that we're going to be playing RG3 instead of Colt McCoy.
Well, I haven't heard for sure either way, but it looks like if RG3 is healthy, he will be the one playing.
Yeah, it hasn't been announced, but I couldn't imagine. If RG3 is healthy, they have to play him because Washington has to know what they have in him because they gave up so much for him. They got to know if he'll work in their system with their new coach. So they have to play him regardless.
That's true. If he's healthy, he'll play. No doubt. But the Redskins do have a lot of weapons. They are a scary team, despite the poor offensive line and struggling defense. They are a team that can come out and bring it, as you saw on Monday night against the Dallas Cowboys. They got a ton of pressure on Tony Romo and the Cowboys just by showing different types of pressure and then backing off. This is one area where Teddy Bridgewater is really going to have to be smart. He's going to have to read the defense, not by what they show, but what he believes they're going to do.
On the positive side, Teddy Bridgewater is a pretty smart kid, so I think he will be up to the challenge. But you're right, it will be a good test for him next week. Be a good test for the offensive line as well, too. Can they block what Washington's going to bring?
That's true. Very true. All right, on that note, do you have anything else you want to talk about this week?
No, I think that'll do it on my end.
All right, on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Check us out on Facebook. The Facebook page is always ready to be commented on, and we're always there to put our 2 cents in and have a nice discussion. On Twitter, at Purple People Pod, that's Kyle. Just have a nice little chat with him. He's usually pretty personable. He's usually live tweeting the game on game day. I know that's a lot of fun. I do that with The Walking Dead, so.
Oh, it's a blast. I love our interactions from our podcast people. And we even talk Monday night football games, Thursday night football games. We're there for it. Sometimes as much of a Vikings fans as we all are, when we get to make fun of awkward moments, like what happened at the end of that overtime game last night with them pulling Colt McCoy from the press, you guys on Twitter were just absolutely phenomenal during that. That was just as fun as could be.
Oh yeah, it's always fun. On that note, thank you for listening, and stay classy, Minnesota.